Have you ever stopped to wonder what the true meaning behind Joy Boy's symbol here truly is? You know, the one symbol shared by all of the factions tied to him or the Sun God, like in Alabasta, Fishman Island, Shandora, Wano, the Buccaneers. Well, I have, and after years of smashing my head against the wall trying to figure this thing out, I think I finally cracked it. Not my head, I hope, the symbol here. And if what I'm about to show you right now turns out to be true, it quite literally explains like half the story's biggest mysteries, like what the New Dawn is, why does Luffy need to bring it, what is the true nature of the entire One Piece universe, you know, just to name a few of them. All of this and much, much more is what I want to tackle today with you in this mega theory on the Bagua. Alright, so as you probably already realized when you clicked on this video, this one is gonna be a pretty dense and long breakdown because straight up, honestly, you need to get it kind of all at once to fully see the whole picture in order for this to make sense in general. Now, all of this really started when I was sitting down with two of my teammates going over video ideas for the channel, and one of the baldies wanted to do a video unraveling how to read the poneglyphs, which, you know, is interesting. He theorized that maybe the way you'd actually read them is you overlay all the different rubbings on top of each other, and therefore a new message would finally get revealed because, you know, triangulating Laugh Tale with them doesn't really make too much sense since they're able to move from island to island. Unless you like try to base it on where they started, but that doesn't really line up with Zanisha moving and all that. So my other baldy then started looking for things related to the poneglyphs, and I told him it might be worth checking out The Journey to the West since, you know, we've been prepping stuff in the background for that video as well. In case you don't know, The Journey to the West is one of the oldest novels in the world that inspired a ton of characters from Goku to Infernape to our very own Monkey D. Luffy, since it is all about Sun Wukong. And well, let me say, jackpot in my head because we found something pretty crazy. This is the Immortal Stone. I mean, on name alone, it lines up pretty nicely with the poneglyphs already since they are giant immortal stones, so this was a pretty good first impression. But what really triggered my theory senses was the description of that very stone in the story. It's described as an object that stands atop the mountain of flowers and fruit, which was already sus to me because of those narrative implications that could tie to Emu and everything and devil fruits. You know, Emu being in the room of flowers on top of the world. But then I dug even deeper and saw that it was this very stone that originally gave birth to Sun Wukong, and that the stone was channeling the energy of heaven, Yang, and the energy of earth, Yin. Now just to clarify, I'm talking about this. We all know Yin and Yang, I assume. You've probably seen the symbol like a billion times in a million different ways on some cheap, I don't know, like yoga retreat or something, but that's not all the Immortal Stone truly has to offer, because it's also said to have 8 holes in it, representative of the 8 trigrams, which should track for any of you Naruto fans amongst you, since Hinata and Neji always be talking about those pesky 8 trigrams and palm rotations and whatnot, but it's also the influence for the 8 paths, and actually is a massive inspiration in a ton of different anime that I've realized after I actually dug into it. So seeing how important this was, it got me really amped up, so I took a minute to just kind of browse it, expecting to see maybe some interesting ties into One Piece that could be relevant, and boy, was I wrong, because it is everything, man. And it was this, the 8 trigrams, that truly cracked open everything for me with this theory. So yeah, this all started out by me wanting to, you know, make a theory about the poneglyphs, but I might have just cracked open One Piece by accident along the way, because not only can someone take all the fun symbols of the 8 trigrams and overlay them on top of each other to reveal new and different messages, like what I hope would line up with the poneglyphs, but much more importantly, they are arranged in a very, very specific shape. Well, actually, shape might not be summarizing it well enough for you. They're arranged in a very clear symbol. A symbol that I somehow have missed this entire time in my years and years of making One Piece theories, because it answers an age-old question I've been struggling to unravel for literal years now, almost a decade, something that ties into so many different parts of One Piece, and with more and more unraveling, it has helped me tie together loose threads decades in the making. Because let me introduce you to the great symbol that blew my mind, the Bagua. And immediately, if you're a deep theory nerd like myself, you should see this and get already a pretty good hint at what I've been obsessing over. Because this is the symbol, you know? Okay, maybe not. Okay, I've got you, editor. Take us home. We can do better than that, right? Show them the good stuff. It's the symbol of the ancient kingdom, a mark that many theorists have pointed out is very similar across many different factions throughout the One Piece world. And all of these clans and places associated with Joy Boy seem to use this very symbol, and I've been thinking for a very long time that it's representative of 8 nations, maybe places like Wano, Elbaf, Fishman Island, and Alabasta, who all allied themselves with Joy Boy. So for a couple of years now, this has always just been my impromptu Joy Boy symbol that I knew would have some sort of grand significance at some point, but I've never seen it anywhere before associated with the Bagua. And straight up, I don't know how, because as I kept reading into it more and more, I just realized how unbelievably clear it was to me that this is obviously where Oda has been pulling a ton of inspiration from for the story. Not only do I think that it's 8 kingdoms that are represented on the symbol, but Joy Boy's entire role in the universe is built around the key principles here. You see, the principle of Eastern metaphysics are deeper insights into what Oda has been planning to do with the series from the very beginning all the way to the ending of One Piece, I think. And yes, that is a very bold claim, but look how much we still have left to go. We barely even started, so trust me and follow me down the rabbit hole a little bit, and let's have some fun here. Now, I know I've been a little bit rude and just tossed some wild terms at you. I should actually explain what the heck the Bagua actually even is. Now, if you're a hardcore One Piece fan, you might even have recognized the good old Flame Bagua, the Thunder Bagua, the Drunken Bagua, because those are good old Kaido and his attacks, but I've never really talked about it properly on the channel. And I mean, totally fair, I don't expect you to know all about Chinese symbolism, astrology, and Feng Shui. That would be crazy. Not many Western people casually know about this stuff, so let me break the 8 trigrams truly down for you, because it's actually way bigger than just the trigrams, though those are a lot too. These symbols are actually just a piece in an even bigger cosmic puzzle, and One Piece is surely taking a lot from it, which is the Great Axis. The concept of the Great Axis is a massive grand universal principle. It starts in one big hole that then keeps breaking in half until it becomes the 8 trigrams, aka the Bagua. It's widely attributed to an ancient text known as the Classic of Changes, also popularly known as the I Ching, I think is how you pronounce that, very sorry. And the Bagua itself is also an ancient Chinese divination tool. If you've ever watched a show or movie that shows people using straw stalks to predict the future, that's a direct use of the Classic of Changes. And you might have realized it's also the primary thing used in Feng Shui. The Bagua helps determine the flow of energies inside spaces, pushing good energies in and bad energies out. Something, by the way, that Oda clearly has learned and dropped really intentionally into the series during the Elbaf arc with, you know, Loki's really hot mom Estrid. Not to mention that literally the name is the Classic of Changes. Change, growth, and bringing the new dawn are of course exactly what Luffy's gonna pull off by the end of the series. Love it or hate it, it is his destiny, and I literally think that it is his cosmic destiny at that. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly why Luffy's true role is to complete the Classic of Changes, and over the course of this truly long theory, God, we're not even like 10% done, you'll keep learning exactly what this means. But it is also so much more than just that. In One Piece, you'll clearly see the Classic of Changes being a massive theme that Oda has used for many characters like Nika, Imu, Joy Boy, Roger, Kaido, Blackbeard, and yes, also Luffy. So let's start with what the primary text actually says. Of course, I can't read the actual literal text, but I thought I'd pop it on screen and read you the translation instead, because I don't speak Chinese, just Japanese. Not close enough, sadly. Having change is the Great Axis. The Great Axis produces the paired forces. The paired forces produce the 4 aspects, and the 4 aspects produce the 8 ways. The 8 ways, the final division of the Great Axis, is the Bagua, just for reference. Meaning though that I need to start with you all the way at the top here, the Great Axis, and I'll walk you down the road to the Bagua at the end. The I Ching explains that this Great Axis, the totality of everything in the universe, divided 3 times. First into 2, then into 4, and then into 8. And I personally believe that these divisions are also representative of the 3 worlds we know about in the One Piece world, and that the Ancient Kingdom symbol has secretly been cluing us into this all along. The Great Axis, Taiji, is the complete totality of the universe, space, and time. It is derivative of Wuji without axis, which is the formless, dimensionless, limitless, the infinite void. Yeah, as a very small-time JJK YouTuber here on the channel, I think it only makes sense that I talk about the infinite void here in One Piece 2 whenever I get the chance. Anyhow, this principle should kind of make sense. It's existence and nothingness. You need it to have anything else. In fact, these principles set up the foundation of many schools of thought, including Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. Really, it's a major principle in Eastern cosmology overall, which is also very popular in Japan, and so it's a natural place for Oda to pull from when it comes to the grander part of the One Piece universe. Plus, by the way, if you want to get really anime with it, Toriyama, Oda's contemporary and someone he looked up to a lot, also used it as a central theme in Dragon Ball. You know, considering that both stories draw a lot from Journey to the West, this tracks too. But boy, it turns out I'm neither a JJK channel nor a Dragon Ball channel, so let's focus specifically on One Piece, and I wanted to start here and point out that the Great Axis and its origins immediately stood out to me because of something that I've been talking about pretty much every single week since it came out, which is the Harley text and the giant mural. Specifically, the second and third worlds start with the lines, "Within the void there was breath," and "Within chaos there was emptiness." This is exactly what is stated in the classics of changes. When the formless void began to stir, the Great Axis came to be. And so I want to propose the idea here and now so that you can keep it in mind as I break it down further. Jokes aside, I want to focus on that line repeating in the various parts of the Harley text. Because when you look at it, we've got 3 worlds that all focus on the arrival of a sun god. But they also all seem to end or begin with an era of emptiness and darkness, very much like the beginning of the classic. Now, looking at this, I think that the conclusion to be drawn is that Oda has set up each One Piece world to start with the Great Axis, at least according to the Harley text. And if that is to be true, it would mean that whoever Nika fought in the first world was just another revolution in this big cosmic wheel, starting the next sort of universal reset. In fact, the cycle might just go back even further than just the first world, which seems like a crazy idea, but it lines up very perfectly with the Harley and the classic of changes too. But again, you want to hear about Nika and the Earth God, so let's shift into the next phase of the classic of changes as we creep towards the Bagua. Having change is the Great Axis. The Great Axis produces the paired forces. What does that mean? So, at some point, the Great Axis splits and creates what is known as Liang Yi, the dual powers. You might not recognize them immediately by that term, but you will when I show you this symbol here. These are the dual forces Ketchup and Mayo. I mean yin and yang. The symbol is arguably the single most important and famous symbol maybe of all time, except for like the golden arches of McDonald's. God, I'm hungry. I gotta take a snack after this. So, it's truly zero surprise that Oda would make this symbol an absolute backbone in his story as well. So, what do they actually represent though? Well, together, yin and yang are totality, but separately, they are the following. Yin represents darkness. It is the original, central, and passive element. Meanwhile, yang represents the opposite. It's representative of brightness, the extreme, the furthest reaches, and is a very active element. Now, this is something I've actually known about and collectively the community has pointed out here and there, but with all the lore drops Oda has made during Elbaf, it really hit me on the head this time around. This is the phase of changes that ties in best with Nika and Imu, or whomever he fought against, that is the Earth God from the first world. Now, I personally like to think that that was actually Imu already, but the other half of me kind of hopes it's a totally new character so that each world has its own unique pair of fighting. The Abyss and the Sun. Nika and the Earth God, Joy Boy and Imu, and then, who knows, maybe Luffy and Blackbeard. It would just kind of feel right, you know? Anyhow, slow down, Manu, I got ahead of myself there a little bit. Nika represents Yang. He's bright and active. After all, he's the sun god and warrior of liberation. Again, the sun, which tracks with the entire light stuff. His goal is bringing smiles and good vibes like the cool dude at a party, but I'd also say he perfectly represents extreme, as the Elbathians seem to view Nika both as a savior and a great bringer of chaos and destruction. His goal of accomplishing revolution and change is very clearly extreme also, and so would Luffy be as well then. And this also lines up with the very serious depiction of Gear 5 that we've seen before, where Luffy looks like an absolute psychopath in his Nika form. And hey, literally it seems like Nika's true powers are to stretch the furthest, to stretch reality, embodying the final and true term of Yang. Meanwhile, Yin is darkness. It's the passive principle of the universe, characterized as female and sustaining and associated with earth, dark, and cold. Now, I don't know about you, but all these things line up pretty well with a ton of stuff we've been talking about, with Imu being potentially the Earth God, being a woman, and the cold-hearted nature of how the Harley text describes the Earth God as well. You know, with all the slave domination and using giant hellflame serpents to destroy gods and the Earth, to me at least, it seems very clear that this Earth God was at the center of that first era. And, fun fact, apparently also is the center of the solar system, if we at least believe the model of Ohara, where we see the solar system of the One Piece world. Now, I've actually made some theories trying to actively debunk this point before, but if the Earth is the massive center planet, this Earth God would truly be the center of it all. As we can see in the mural, they also seem to harness the center of the planet, the Forbidden Sun. At least all this industry digging deep into the planet and pulling out energy seems to be very indicative of that. And they're also the original. There before Nika arrived at the prayers of the enslaved, they were there first. And I would argue they also seem to be fairly passive, enslaving folks, having them do their work, and banking on their big hellflame serpent doing all the work fighting Nika. Assuming you know that Nika might be the dragon in the mural and the Earth God is this little crowned figure here, who knows. I also think that as we discuss this stuff, there's another key element of Yin and Yang to acknowledge that would be really important for the show potentially as well. This seems to say that within the Sun God, there is darkness, and within the Earth God Imu, there is good. And I personally kind of love this idea because it lines up really well with the themes of ambiguity that Oda absolutely loves to play with. Like in Vegapunk's message, for instance, where even he could not state for certain if he thought Joy Boy, or who we now realize was probably Imu, was in the right or was in the wrong. He said both sides kind of had their arguments. Of course, the same can be said for pirates and marines in the show. They are both good and evil within their respective factions. It is all kind of about balance and duality. But I think that the largest piece of evidence is actually on Elbaf, when everyone and their mother can't decide if Nika is a hero or a destroyer. Something that I will also dive deeper into later, but is important for this phase of the Classic of Changes, is that there are many natural dualities based on these principles. Some key ones, especially for One Piece, are light and dark, fire and water, expanding and contracting. Physical manifestations of the forces that we know dominate the world at large. Light and dark are pretty obvious, but fire and water also seem to represent the characters like Joy Boy and Imu, who have direct ties to fire and water. The Forbidden Sun, the Eternal Flame, the Sun God, like all of that is fire. Then Imu is Umi backwards, which stands for ocean Japanese. That sounds like water to me. And of course, expanding and contracting is like exactly the difference between Luffy's powers and Blackbeard's powers. Luffy's body expands indefinitely, meanwhile Blackbeard's Dark Void is the ultimate contracting force, sucking everything in. Nice. Now, what does this all mean for the narrative? Well, I personally think that in the series, we're gonna eventually see this play out if we get a First World flashback. Fingers crossed, but if we don't, I'm gonna wager a bet that we will learn about the dual powers that destroyed the First World. Yin, the darkness that embodied the Abyss, was used by the Earth God and his Hellflame Serpent. Yin is the power that the villains chase, like Imu and Blackbeard, and that's why Yang, the power of light and the sun, was used by Nika during the First World. He used it to defeat the Earth God, but couldn't pull it off, and that's why the world had to end. They weren't strong enough to restore balance to the cosmic forces alone, and this is gonna be a little bit of a spoiler, but as you'll continue to see in this video, the solution might just be dividing further and further, gaining more through the final Bagua. I think this also could explain a little fickle thing that I've been hung up for a while too, because the thing that's really bothered me is the silly translation for the Harley. It kind of just literally actually is in some places straight up wrong in English. You see, when they translated this, they forgot a key detail, which is that the sun god is always referred to in the original Japanese with quotation marks. It's not read as the sun god, it is read as the sun god, with that little stinky sarcasm. Ugh. What that means, of course, is that Nika either wasn't actually a god or he wasn't the sun god. He was probably maybe just a dude with his hands on the power of Yang, the power of the sun, and flipped it against the earth god, who very much seems to be a real actual god. Same, by the way, for the forest and the sea gods. So yin and yang, this phase of the classic of changes, is clearly where Oda draws a lot of symbolism and inspiration from, and it was the moment that I really felt like I struck gold when researching for this theory. But boy, little did I know, deeper than just gold, there was an even better prize awaiting me. Because allow me to take us now back to the Book of Changes, just as a little refresher since it's been a couple of minutes already. Goddamn, this is a long video. I think it also really helps us get some clarity on it, since this stuff is dense, and I feel like I'm only ever scratching the surface of everything I'm discussing here. So once again, having changes the great axis produces the paired forces we just talked about, and now the paired forces produce the four aspects. Now these four aspects are great yang, lesser yin, and great yin. And each of these also lines up with a cardinal direction, which is huge for the poneglyph stuff I set out to unravel at the beginning, but also the four aspects each line up with one of the four creatures in Chinese mythology that represent each of these directions too. And as you'll find out in a moment, anime loves to pull from these guys. Yu Yu Hakusho does it, God of High School's Dai Wai does it, that one dude with the ski mask in JJK does it too, so it only makes sense that Oda did the same with One Piece somewhere. So this is our next big chunk to unravel together, the four aspects. We've moved down, we've divided. So this is now our next big chunk to unravel together, the four aspects we've divided a second time. And this is the part where I first felt like I was really getting a return on investment on this when I was first breaking it all down. I wanted to figure out what was up with the poneglyphs, and so I figured the section that says four aspects would probably tie into the four rote poneglyphs. And I do think that in some way it really does, but it also ties really well into so many things like the four oceans, the four gods, and some other characters and things that made it really clear that the Classic of Changes was Oda's big inspiration when it came to world building the One Piece world. And as I break them down individually, I want you to remember that Yang is the section I feel ties best into Nika and the Sun, and so it makes a bunch of sense when you actually look at what they represent. Let's start with Great Yang. This represents the summer solstice, aka the longest day of the year. It also typically lines up with south and also represents the most sun. That's a cool phrase I need it in my life, but hey, who doesn't want the most sun? Sounds like some cool band name, actually. Anyway, something I think that super clicks is that Great Yang also represents the Crimson Phoenix. And most importantly for us, it's also tied directly to the element of fire. This right here, this is oozing Joy Boy and Luffy, baby. Literally, the key to waking up Gear 5 was death and rebirth, plus Luffy has his bird attacks, Red Rock and Red Hawk, which are quite literally flaming bird attacks. And like, think about it, really. The most sun, the element of fire, these are all things that Oda has hammered into us directly being connected to Joy Boy. He wanted to bring the new dawn. He's the reincarnation of the sun god, but it's even clearer than just that. Joy Boy had the poneglyphs made by the Kozuki clan, and their symbol is a big bird with a sun on it. That's all she wrote for me, man. Like, this is a near perfect one-to-one tie-in. So once I saw this, I felt like Wario when he gets all the coins. Manu number one! Anyways, below this is Lesser Yang, the spring equinox, the day that the daylight starts to increase, but also day and night are the same length. It's tied to the east and also represents the Azure Dragon and the element of wood. Now, I think when I said Azure Dragon, most of you know exactly where I want to go with this. Yeah, Kaido. But I can't do that right now because after I'm done with this whole section breaking down the Classic of Changes, Kaido is gonna get his own little section in this video because that dude is like hyper critical, super mega important to all of these ideas somehow. So just have some patience. We will get to the Azure Dragon a little bit later. So instead, let's shift over to Yin. To be more precise, Lesser Yin, the increasing night in the west, represented by the white tiger and the element metal. Now I want to point out that in One Piece we don't have anything that truly ties into the symbol, except for the non-canon marine Sapphire, who pilots a ship known as the White Tiger. But this might very well still change. Next, I will explain the Great Yin, and it's embodying the winter solstice, or the longest night of the year, north, and the least sun, as well as the black tortoise and the element of water. Now in the series, these things totally seem to tie in really well with Emu and Blackbeard, the polar opposites of Luffy and Joy Boy. Water we've already covered earlier, and how that part ties into Emu, since Emu is all about blotting out the sun, figuratively, and flooding the world. Black holes and darkness powers like the Yami Yami no Mi and the Abyss, that's giving pretty great Yin energy to me, and this core element continues down in the next phase of the classic changes, the Bagua. However, I really wanted to take a quick moment here and show you that each section of the Great Axis has some version of fire and water acting as foils. Cosmically, they're opposites that always tie into the earliest stages of the Great Axis, just as a dark evil guy stands opposed to the Sun God in each single world/era of One Piece. This stuff is awesome and I love it, and what gets me really amped up here is just how many other things this stuff ties into within the series. Like, if it was just characters and factions, I'd be like, cool, nice reference, but also media like totally does this all the time now. But there are so many specific things in the series that Oda ties to these forces that have excited me in my research that I don't even know where to begin. So I have to just start by talking about arguably the biggest thing they could tie into, another thing that I've been hyper fixated on recently, which are the 4 gods of the One Piece world. As a quick recap, we were introduced to the 4 gods in Skypiea, and then we got a lot more info about them in the Harley text. And they are perfectly represented by the 4 aspects and their elements. The element of wood, aka the Lesser Yang, that just screams forest gods, especially since wood is the sign of growth, and the Harley literally talks about the forest gods spreading and creating demons. Greater Yang and fire, I mean, I already said that one is like perfect sun god. Meanwhile, on the opposite end, there is Greater Yin, which embodies water, aka the sea/rain god in One Piece. Again, the only one I kind of struggle with a little bit is Lesser Yin, aka metal, since that would have to line up with the earth god. Now, not that metal doesn't have anything to do with earth, but obviously the center element is earth, so I feel like that would fit a lot better, but it does make me think that maybe there could even be a secret 5th god representing metal. Davy Jones maybe, or something that ties in with the Galela. Heck, I'd even take some cool robot god that ties into the automatas up in space, or Emeth, or all that stuff. But like, do you see just how deep this one level of the Great Axis goes already? Well, it's about to go way deeper, dude. Not what she said. For example, the thing that truly started this whole journey for me, the poneglyphs, also totally line up with the 4 aspects. 4 divided stones, each with their very own message, that are a compass to Laugh Tale. Because what I haven't explained yet is that the 4 aspects sometimes, secretly, low-key, have a 5th aspect too. Not in terms of the Bagua itself, but in the other stuff that associates with the 4 aspects in other parts of Chinese mythology. We're talking about the center, the yellow dragon, or Kirin, which is the center that represents Earth. Like, what the heck, Oda? We did get a Kirin devil fruit as part of the Holy Knights, but the idea that the 4 cardinal directions have a center point works pretty perfectly with what started me on this entire trail. The 4 aspects can represent the poneglyphs, and the center would be Laugh Tale. Now, could Laugh Tale connect to a Kirin or a dragon? It would tie in nicely with that giant egg that Roger was carrying around maybe. Or what if the Earth is more important and Laugh Tale connects to the original Earth god. Like, sit with it for a minute, man. What if Laugh-Tale truly is at the center of the world and that entrance is only revealed by reading the poneglyphs? The four aspects guide the way towards the center, Earth, which would tie into the mural and the Harley, since I'm pretty confident that the thing that the Earth god harnessed is the Forbidden Sun, something being mined at the center of the planet as the mural depicts. So maybe each poneglyph correlating to each cardinal direction gives a coordinate, one for east, west, south, north, and then, where those lines meet is actually where the entrance to Laugh-Tale truly is. Also, just gonna point it out, it is straight up the world government symbol, something in the middle, and four, bubbles around it. I mean, yeah. And again, this is just one way that you can tie in or interpret this. There are many, many more ways that I will talk about later. I am absolutely living for this video, and yet there's still so much more to explain before we get there, because I want to tell you what I've uncovered about Luffy's journey, Joy Boy's origins, and how the Bagua itself is so freaking important. But this stuff is so dense, as you can tell, and there is so much here that I'm not even done talking about the four aspects yet. We're not even getting to the real juicy bit, which leads me to the real big kicker here. What do the four aspects truly mean for the narrative beyond just the symbolism and the tie-ins? Well, when I sit back and interpret it, I think that the four aspects are supposed to show us the history of the Void Century, Joy Boy's second world in One Piece. Basically, my idea is that the four aspects truly come into physical manifestations as the four road poneglyphs. They are the real roadmap that Joy Boy created. They guide the next era to Laugh-Tale so that they can fulfill the next cycle of the classic of the changes, which now finally is the Bagua. Joy Boy could not win. We know that because Emu is in charge during the series right now. But there are several things like the Harley, Basil Hawkins, and Madame Charlie which showcase that predicting the future is very much possible. And remember, as I mentioned way earlier, the Bagua itself is meant to be a divination tool too. Estrid, your Feng Shui stuff is going to be actually important. Just you wait. So, I think that Joy Boy needed to create the four aspects since he has seen a premonition of someone accomplishing his dream. He set up some plans with Lily to release the poneglyphs, failsafes like the Haki knot inside of Emeth, and then created a big plan for the next era and the next worlds. Like, this might even explain why Toki went from the Void Century to the modern era and was looking specifically for Wano. She might very well have been another failsafe designed to ensure the next Joy Boy could appear. And that's why I think that the Void Century is the era that ties into the four aspects best. All of this is tied to things in Joy Boy's era and then bleeds into Luffy's. The four aspects are the bridging phase so that Luffy can complete the Great Axis and divide it once again, thus creating and restoring the Bagua. Now, why do I think that, and what in the world is this Bagua, and what does it symbolize? Well, it's now time, I think, to really get into the meat and potatoes of this. I'm just so incredibly pumped to finally talk about this since I've been alluding to it the entire time. The Bagua is real!
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
So, the 8 trigrams, the 8 passages or paths, and the Bagua are pretty much all the same thing. It's now the 3rd division of Liang Yi, the 4 aspects, into 8 divisions, I guess. And these are the basic universal forces that can be read for divination, but also all carry their own different weights for balance and energy dispersion in the universe. And if you've been following the math, which I know, come on, of course you have, you probably know that we went from 2 forces with yin and yang to the greater and lesser pairs that formed the 4 aspects, which means that among the 8 trigrams, 4 represent yin and 4 once again represent yang. The trigrams associated with the yin and darkness are the trigrams of heaven, water, wind, and lake. Interesting that heaven and wind are over there, considering that in One Piece typically that stuff is usually tied to good things, but well, I think it makes sense in the long run. Water specifically is the one that represents the north, the top of the Bagua, and the thing I've been waiting to say all day, it is also the symbol of the abyss and the longest night. Woo! We finally got it. The abyss at the top of the world, symbolic of the most darkness in the north, the darkest point possible. Opposite of it are the trigrams associated with the yang and light: thunder, mountain, fire, and earth. And you already know it, fire is in the south, and the longest day is the radiant symbol. In other words, the sun. Now, I'm sure you're a little bit confused because everything I've talked about makes it seem like fire should be in the east and then water should be in the west, and those things line up most with Joy Boy or Luffy against Emu going from east to west, blah blah blah, you get the idea, but wait, just wait. You'll see in a moment why all of this makes perfect sense. So, something that I've been sitting on is just how truly perfect this all ties into Luffy's current world state. These symbols also represent energy amounts, with fire being the most energy and water being the lowest level of energy. This kind of totally reminds me of the Ancient Kingdom, by the way, all this ancient tech and how Vegapunk created the Mother Flame to recreate the Ancient Kingdom's eternal flame, infinite energy. The most energy is tied to fire, and in the Bagua, this lines up very, very, very well with Luffy. It's also a symbol directly tied to dancing, which who knew is another key aspect of Nika. The Nika pose, the dancing that brings happiness and laughter, it is a 100% match. Meanwhile, surprise, Emu is like the total opposite, starving the world of progress and technology. They try to harness that power for themselves only too. This isn't the only big thing I wanted to show you, of course. If that was it, I mean, I would have just skipped straight to that section way earlier. No, I wanted you to have all the context we've been building up so far because, well, I just think it is all, first of all, very cool, but also because when I hit you with the biggest reveal yet so far, you'd understand how all the dividing of the classics truly worked. Because there is not just one Bagua, yeah, there's two. At some point, the Bagua flipped and became the Bagua I described to you, with fire at the top and water at the bottom. That version is known as the Manifested or Later Heaven Bagua. But before that, there was a different arrangement, where each trigram was shifted, known as the Primordial Bagua, which, like, dude, is just, by the way, the coldest and coolest title ever. I mean, imagine if Kaido was chilling and then suddenly unleashed a Primordial Bagua attack. That's just an epic word. Primordial. Love it. Primordial Ohara. But it's also the earlier Heaven Bagua, and in this arrangement, not only do the trigrams move around, but they also represent a very different concept. In this case, it describes a family. The father in the south is the heaven symbol, while the mother in the north is the earth symbol, with 3 daughters and 3 sons, each representing the other symbols. And guess what? Water and fire end up in the east and west, just like I hoped that they would. This right here, as you're hopefully gonna see now, is something that just totally blew my mind, for like several reasons I'm gonna discuss with you right now. As I showed in the edit earlier, there are tons of symbols and things associated with the number 8, or in multiples of 8, that are just way too coincidental to, well, be a coincidence. Every faction associated with Joy Boy has the 8 circle symbol that is one-to-one just straight up the Bagua chart. Then there's theories like the idea that Joy Boy had 8 kingdoms who rallied alongside him against the 20 kingdoms, all of which could be represented in the Bagua. Another sick pattern I noticed that could tie into this as well, that explains why Roger was too early in his plans, was that it's been 800 years since the Void Century. So could it be that this big cosmic cycle that Joy Boy set into motion literally had to wait 800 years specifically for the Bagua to be able to reset in the first place? Which, you know, probably has something to do with energies rebalancing on like a cosmic or world level scale. Something massive is the implication that the Heavenly Father and the Earth Mother had a big old family, but also were the original calendar's top and bottom. Nice. Actually, something that I know a bunch of theorists have talked about, and an idea I literally push all the time on this channel, is that the Abyss, Emu, etc., these things all seem to be tied to women. And that there is a world, one that after I did this research seems really likely, where domestic disputes could be the core of this entire show. Love and romance have been a major thing for Oda for this entire series. Just think Romance Dawn. Love is like this almost wishy-washy good and bad concept for a bunch of different characters, and Emu having matching outfits with Gunko, possessing Gunko, and being obsessed with Lily has always made me think that they most likely are a woman. They could be the Earth Mother, the Earth Goddess. Meanwhile, Nika, Joy Boy, and Luffy are the embodiment of the Heavenly Father. Like, let's be real, how crazy would it be if the first world was ruled by the Earth Goddess and her husband was Nika? It like totally explains how someone would get their hands on the Forbidden Sun to potentially flip the world upside down and cause this massive world-destroying battle. Nika being called the Sun God might be put in quotation marks because he was the man closest to the Earth Goddess and was viewed as a god for betraying his wife and saving the slaves. Little sidetrack here, but it also totally lines up with characters like Gaia in Greek mythology, who was Mother Earth and the reason we call our real-life planet Mother Earth. You probably have realized that Oda's always had some pretty big environmental messaging in the series, like in Alabasta and Wano, which are like totally major lore arcs, by the way. So how fitting would it be that the whole story started because the man, Nika, challenged Mother Earth herself, causing all of these big problems. A quick note that I wanted to add while I was writing the script is that Oda just very recently dropped a lot of crazy stuff about Shaki being the crown jewel of Hachinosu. You know, doubling down on the idea that love affairs and women are like a massive central point for very big conflicts in the series. Shaki, in a way, caused God Valley. The world may have been like super flooded as a result, maybe in an effort to prevent Mother Earth from using her full powers or something, and that's why Imu has all of these ties to the ocean instead. The Earth is no longer what they rule over, it's now just ocean. And so the Bagua flipped after changing in the One Piece world from the one ruled by heaven and earth, switching to fire and water, since that's what the real battle is fighting over now. But what's even wilder to me is that I might even be able to tell you when that actually took place in the story. Something I brought up in another mega theory I wrote a while ago, which I think still holds up surprisingly well and is a crazy video in its own right about the gods and terraforming and blah blah blah. You get the idea? You can check it out if you're interested after. In that video, I talked about the two One Piece calendars. There was a moment somewhere around 1500 to 1600 years ago in the story where the calendar switched from the sky or heavenly calendar to the sea circle calendar. As in, literally, the calendars switched from heaven on top to water on top, perfectly mirroring what the primeval Bagua was and the later Heaven Bagua now is. A shift from heaven on top to water on top, in this case, Emu on top, Lunarion's not on the top anymore. And this like totally could be the moment, not only that the calendar switched, but that the actual balance of the One Piece world flipped too. The moment that the One Piece world shifted from the primordial Bagua to the manifested one, maybe between the first and second worlds. Now, something of note that does get confusing, I think, because it was to me at the beginning, is that the Bagua labels the south as the top of the chart and the north as the bottom here. So while technically heaven and water are the southern symbols depending on the Bagua, they are displayed at the top of the Bagua map, since a lot of it has to do with energies moving east and west and all that stuff. I absolutely love this. I love getting to jump headfirst into some insane theory material and just finding all these fun connecting threads that push things up and end up making surprisingly a lot of sense. I'm not sure if you're agreeing, but for me, these mega theories just always scratch a super satisfying itch for, you know, theories that sometimes my weekly uploads just can't hit just by definition for being short. Anyways, here's what you've been hungering for. Now we're getting into the juicy bits. Now that we have talked about the Bagua and explained everything, I can really show you how it all matters in the story right now. I theorized about what those tie-ins are and what the true story of the world could be, and now that I've done that, I get to finally show you what Joy Boy was planning and how he planned to fix the balance of the world by restoring the primordial Bagua. I believe that from the time of Nika and the Earth God, something was thrown off. Whether it was a massive dark energy being, or the eternal flame being destroyed, or even a god being captured. Something big got screwed up and the cosmic energies in the One Piece world are completely out of line. Maybe Nika screwed them up, then Joy Boy tried to fix them but couldn't, and now Luffy's left to kind of pick up the slack here. He's gonna be the one who needs to bring balance to the force, to the world, and create what we all now know as the New Dawn. Yeah, that's right. All this Bagua stuff wasn't even the main theory. We were just explaining and setting stuff up. This was just the greatest preamble of all time. I mean, yeah, it's a long video. It's still a long video. And let me take a quick water break. So, to now get into why Luffy needs to restore balance to the world and how he might do it, we need to talk about the story that started me down this Bagua path to begin with, which is the journey to the west. At the beginning of this video, and pretty much throughout it as well, I've been bringing up the Bagua, obviously, but I've also been really focused in on the journey to the west and how it ties into the 8 trigrams. Again, quick reminder, the 8 trigrams, the Bagua, were engraved on Sun Wukong's egg, and he then hatched from that. I actually started this video off with this when I spoke of the Immortal Stone, you might remember. This is the Immortal Stone. This thing is so fascinating to me, and honestly, I need to do a full deep dive into Journey to the West now that I've dug a lot more into it. That probably deserves its own video, but for now, I want to focus in on how I think all of this stuff really completes the story of One Piece. Because something I left out earlier when I talked about what created Sun Wukong was the thing that pushed him into cracking, because what caused the Immortal Stone to hatch or spit out Wukong was the wind. One day, when exposed to the wind, the stone egg transformed into the stone monkey, and thus Wukong was born. Something, by the way, I immediately thought might line up there, you know, with Roger's egg. Part of me just wanted to make a crazy statement about how Luffy was born from the egg, and like Loki, I don't really want that to be true because it kind of lines up with Wukong being born from the egg with the winds. And while I will admit I'm still holding out some hope for it, the timeline gets really messy in my brain. It could be the case, sure, maybe Dragon cracked that bad boy open, but I feel like it was probably something else. There was one piece I couldn't explain, The wind. The stupid wind. How does the wind tie into things? The wind. The trigrams associated with the yin and darkness are the trigrams of heaven, water, wind, and lake. Oh, damn. Sun Wukong is the byproduct of the energies of heaven and earth. Yin and yang. He is both light and darkness in one. He is, once again, also the main character who inspired Luffy the most, and I do think the same thing applies backwards if we look at Nika and Joy Boy. Because the thing I've been missing is what will push them, what caused them to take up their mantles and go on their respective journeys. And I think it has finally clicked for me: the wind. The force that creates Wukong is the wind. One might say the wind is his daddy. The wind is the thing that pushes pirate ships on their way. And in the third One Piece world, you know who represents the wind? Yeah, Monkey D. Dragon. Dragon might actually be the key to unraveling what it is that Luffy needs to be doing in the endgame of this show. He's been a central but somehow absent character, pushing Luffy from the shadows in very subtle ways that have resulted in some epic growth. He saved his son at Loketown, letting him continue his journey, and he's always looking east. Peculiar. Put a pin in that one, we're gonna get back to that. Speaking of east winds though, another character and application of the Bagua that has totally been created that ties perfectly to the whole wind thing is Loki's MILF Estrid. You see, the thing that really keyed me in was the Feng Shui. Feng Shui uses the complete Bagua map to balance out locations like homes and such. You probably have heard of that. We'll have heard someone say, don't mess with the Feng Shui when it comes to moving couches or facing certain directions in the home or where you place your bed in your room. There's like a guy on YouTube, that's his whole channel. He organizes rooms for you, which he does a good job of, I think. That's all kind of like practical applications of balancing the Bagua. They literally use these things called Bagua maps to position things inside of buildings to balance out the Bagua energies, which is exactly what I think Luffy needs to do in the story. In the series, the hottest mom around, Estrid, is all about Feng Shui or geomancy. I found this incredibly interesting because she's also a pure-blooded ancient giant, tying her very nicely to all the Nika worship of the older Elbathians as well. I mean, to be fair, all of the Elbathians do worship, but the ancient ones, they've been doing it the longest. By definition, I guess. I don't know. I know that she's kind of silly and pretty evil also, and honestly a truly terrible mother, but I genuinely think that Oda put her in the last phase of the series to explain this massive new concept for us, or at least to kind of give us a clue that this is coming up soon. Her talking about it feels like a direct inclusion in Harold/Loki's stories so that we, the audience, can pick up on what Oda is trying to tell us about the origins of the sun gods. And that's because Feng Shui lines up with the Bagua, and the Bagua foreshadows, well, everything. It's the thing that caused me to make this entire theory, for example. Ancient giants, the Galela, Ors, Herald, etc. all seem to be directly tied to Nika in some grand fashion, including my girl Astrid here. The pure-blooded giant being all about balance makes me think that her statements, alongside the fact that Rox thought that Herald could potentially be the next Joy Boy too, you know, with the whole Herald needs to eat this fruit thing, like definitely being the Nika fruit probably. I think that all of this stuff was to set up a big reveal for what Luffy needs to actually achieve, which is fix the balance of the One Piece world. Now, the real reason I brought her up though is because she specifically says that Harold's spirit is escaping to the east, something connected to freedom, revolution, and fire in the original Bagua chart that should be good, but it's not, because he's supposed to be facing west towards Imu, towards the enemy that he needs to defeat. If Herald was the next Joy Boy and the ancient giants, rocks, etc. all kind of thought that he was that guy, then his spirit escaping to the east is actually somewhat problematic. It's heading towards fire on the primordial Bagua, the place he should be drawing power from, not the place he should be heading towards. Or I guess just as bad, on the later Bagua, he's heading towards thunder, towards revolution and divide, and yeah, I'd kind of flip too if that was my king, honestly. So what is actually needed and good then to actually save the world? Well, it is basically what Dragon has been doing and been memed to death for the entire story. The next sun god needs a wind from the east that pushes west. This is literally the journey to the west in full action, but through the lens of the Bagua map. Luffy's last arc inside of the East Blue is Loketown, right? The arc that his father saves him on, lets him continue his journey to what would then be the West. Now, if that alone isn't enough to get you yet, I get it. I feel like I'm on the cusp of greatness with this one here, but there is obviously still a big missing element. Luffy has that, but for this wind thing to land, the other incarnations of the sun god need to have wind pushing them too, and they didn't. I'm just kidding, they absolutely did. Boom. Nika, the original sun god, was literally brought into existence by the slaves needing change. Their prayers is what pushed him. Next was Joy Boy, the successor. According to Bing Sake, if that is his story, as I believe, he was pushed by the breeze of the sea, the winds in his sails as the first pirate pushed forward. But none of them were quite right until Luffy, the real final sun god, has appeared, and he is pushed by the winds of change, all thanks to his father, the Will of D, and his very own personal desire to be the freest person alive. But to be free, he needs to defeat Imu, restoring the Bagua to its original state, with heaven and earth overseeing balance instead of water and fire. That way, he would quite literally complete the journey to the west, claiming Laugh Tale and becoming king of the pirates. But wait, that means that I also need to uncover what's on Laugh Tale as well, right? Otherwise that doesn't make sense. All right, you're spot on if you thought this. The whole plan to restore the Bagua hinges on Luffy using whatever Joy Boy left him on Laugh Tale to fix all of this cosmic nonsense. So, what is it, Manu? Give it to me, right? All right. I think I figured it out, but at the very least have a good idea. And the journey is just as revealing as the destination. I started by investigating the person who seemed to be all over the stuff first, because I assumed that their true purpose in the story was to reveal the truth of Laugh Tale the entire time without us directly noticing. So it's time to talk about the man who failed to become Joy Boy and who I promised you we would talk about, Kaido. All right. Look, to be real with you, anytime I get to talk about Kaido, I'm actually happy. I love that guy. Wano is definitely one of my favorite arcs by far. I think it's just been getting better with age, like a fine wine, and it just cannot be understated how influential Kaido was on the overall community and experience of One Piece at large. I mentioned this before, but one of my team members quite legitimately was anti-One Piece for years and then saw Kaido's hybrid form and said, wait, I gotta check this out, and I kind of get it. But even deeper than just cool powers and an epic design is the fact that Oda used him as the perfect enemy to Luffy. Not just from a moral standpoint, not even from a dream standpoint, but as a real stepping stone. Kaido himself knew that he was just a step in the next Joy Boy's path, but he didn't always used to think that. And the Bagua is what truly reveals that, in my humble theorist opinion, because as I mentioned earlier, Kaido is arguably one of my greatest arguments for why I think the Bagua is at the center of One Piece's story. But why? Well, it's because this guy screams about the Bagua all day long, of course. Now, but for real, how does this only reveal the true secrets of Joy Boy and show us what Luffy will need to do to bring the New Dawn? And how will bringing the New Dawn restore the Bagua? Well, it starts with some of the basic things. Kaido, for one, is, as we talked about, the Azure Dragon, one of the 4 aspects I talked about earlier. And actually, something that stood out extra to me was that this sign is the divide for Lesser Yang, the rising sun, which, considering that Wano is based on Japan, is a pretty sick detail. You know, Japan is the land of the rising sun. Nippon, which literally means origin of the sun, and it totally makes me think that this was the reason that Oda had Gear 5 specifically revealed in Wano, since it was literally the country designed for the thing that brings the dawn. Essentially, it makes Luffy the rising sun god, if you want, but from the narrative perspective, it also lines up with the idea that Kaido wanted to be Joy Boy for a big chunk of his past. He took over Wano, which was the land of the sun, and was chasing after Joy Boy. Wano is also shown off earlier, is literally tied to Joy Boy's story deeply. It's like not even funny, it's probably the country deep, like with the most deep ties to Joy Boy. Pluton is there, the Kozuki clan made the poneglyphs, and obviously Gear 5 was revealed to be there. Tie that in with some of the other theory stuff, like the idea that the Galela and Oars and giants from the ancient past may have been from Wano, or at least, you know, working in Wano, specifically Ringo. We do know that Wano got kind of pulled together, potentially after or at the end of the Void Century, right? From different places. Again, Ringo being also the land of ice. And then suddenly, we've got a perfect reason for Kaido taking over this country, not it being some random thing. This man wanted to become Joy Boy. He straight up told King that he might be the one that King was waiting for when he freed him from Punk Hazard, which could just mean that he was a dude there to save him. But seeing as the Lunarians are depicted on the mural and having very epic fire powers, worshipping Joy Boy to some degree, you know, King talking about Joy Boy, I think that really tracks the most. Now, that's just all the context, you know, things I've talked about before. What's crucial is now analyzing his Bagua themes, which, like, bro, it's right there. Thunder Bagua, Drunken Bagua, Dragon Bagua, Flaming Bagua. This dude screams about this thing every time he hits anyone in the face with a big metal club. Ouch. Something I have also been known to do at the bar with the boys after a few too many drinks. Sorry, not sorry, I guess. Anyways, I straight up don't understand how I didn't catch this during Wano for some reason, but I guess I didn't have, you know, some of the full context that would warrant digging deeper. Like, you know, Mama Astrid. Anyways, you can see how Oda applied the real Bagua to Kaido when you see exactly what part of the 8 trigrams he chooses to acknowledge in this arc. Let's start with the best one. Thunder Bagua, his most popular and bread and butter attack, ties to the thunder sign of the Bagua, which is like very critical since thunder represents the feelings of excitement, revolution, and division, which lines up very well with Kaido's story in Gold during Wano overall. Now, if what I said is true, he wanted to be Joy Boy, his plan makes a lot of sense. He wanted to team up with Lin Lin, Big Mom to create a new revolution, a massive divide, the final war. He wanted to split the various factions up with this battle and literally change the world, forcing the New Dawn. Revolution is liberation in One Piece. It's what the Sun God is supposed to bring, and it is what Joy Boy was supposed to bring too, and it's what his former captain tried to do as well. Kaido, as a young man, was excited at the prospects of fighting for and alongside Rocksteady Zebek. This man was his guiding light, essentially, and I'm pretty sure that the end events of God Valley totally crushed Kaido in some crucial way for his character. Rox, this super powerful person who created a legendary crew, was somehow defeated. And actually wouldn't be surprised if Kaido thought Rox straight up was Joy Boy and then thought it was him afterwards since his captain fell short. Which would explain why his ultimate move is the Flaming Dragon Bagua, you know, where he levels up from the sign of thunder to the sign for fire, the risen sun and unleashes his full power. If I were Kaido and I could do this, well, yeah, I think I probably would also consider myself someone with at least having a good chance of being the sun god. And of course, the signs do line up. It's fire, the sign of radiance, and the sun. I mean, that move would make me think that I'm Joy Boy too, and if I was, say, fighting Luffy, who I thought could be Joy Boy, I would use this move because the real Joy Boy would, of course, then be able to surpass it, as he did. Now, of course, that's just half the story, though. What I haven't covered is how Kaido reveals Luffy's true plan as well. And I think the secret to that, a possibility for the secret of Laugh Tale and the secret of Joy Boy, all lies in Kaido's other's biggest personality trait, alcoholism.
Huh?
I'm not drunk, I swear. I just think that drinking is actually, like, weirdly relevant to the story. Like, not kidding. We actually do kind of see that in One Piece because all the big dogs, really when you think about it, kind of like to booze it up. Shanks, Whitebeard, the Roger Pirates, even Blackbeard. Drinking a lot and then connecting with other people is like the pirate move to showcase unity and friendship. It's literally why I named my podcast Drink Sake, where I drink with my guests to connect, because the sake sharing ritual that creates brotherhood is at the core of One Piece in general. It literally forged Luffy, Sabo, and Ace into brothers. You know, I mean, again, so many examples. Roger, Whitebeard, etc., etc. So, how does this tie into Kaido now? Well, first of all, my man is always hammered, and when he's at his strongest is when he's truly unleashing his maximum Bagua, something I need to put on a shirt, by the way. He is turned up. I think it's actually just a massive bit of irony that we'll understand more later in the show, because I think that drinking is the secret strength of Joy Boy, and Kaido became a depressed drunk in the series after he probably realized that, you know, he wasn't Joy Boy. I mean, you were really close and you did a good job helping bring the real Joy Boy Kaido, so close. It counts. I think that Oda wouldn't just weave this character trait into Kaido randomly, a clear template for how the Bagua and all this stuff applies, if the drinking also wasn't so crucial. And so I actually want to bring up an idea from my good friend Arthur, aka the Library of Ohara, since it's very relevant, I think. I believe that Kaido showed us not only where Laugh Tale is, but what is there. Binks Sake. I know you're probably very shocked that I, of all people, would be talking about Binks Sake. It's not like my favorite thing in the series I talk about way too much or anything. All right, yeah, I get it. I talk about it a lot, but that's because I am, at this point, so, beyond confident that this silly drinking song is the key to unraveling the entire show, and the Bagua lines up with it, like, eerily well. Very surprisingly well.
Coincidence? I think not!
I want to talk about a couple of key lines from Binks Sake with you now that I think tie directly into the Bagua based on the key elements that they are talking about. Very quickly though, in case you don't know my thoughts on Binks Sake, I am pretty certain at this point, having retranslated it from Japanese myself, that it does tell the story of Joy Boy and what his master plan was. Now I think though I know exactly what it's saying. It's a story of a cycle of defeat, but Joy Boy found a way to bring the new dawn and reset everything instead. He wants to fix the Bagua somehow by defeating Imu, and to do that, he needs to shift the powers that be in some big way by using the ancient weapons and kind of whatever is on Laugh Tale. That's how I think all of this is gonna tie into the Bagua. There's one line that goes, "But if you just hold on, the morning sun will rise," which seems to imply that Joy Boy needed more time. He needed someone else to come and bring the new dawn instead, and whomever this song is sung to just needs to wait until his successor Luffy finally rises. But what I think is the most interesting is the words hold on and sun, because in the Bagua, the symbol for fire is also the symbol of clinging, holding on, and the radiance of the sun, and it's particularly the symbol of the east in the earlier heavenly Bagua. The east is where the sun rises, and as I said, I think Joy Boy's goal was to reset the Bagua back to its primordial form. Primordial. Love that word. Fantastic. I think that Oda's using some next level wordplay here to showcase that exact concept and what Joy Boy's true goal really is. Luffy bringing the dawn is resetting the Bagua back to its original form, thus rebalancing the forces of the universe so that a new dawn can rise back in the East this time. Something I also found fascinating was the line in Bing Sake that goes, "But don't look so down, for tomorrow night the moon will also rise," and this line is delivered opposite of the other one and highlights the concept of looking down in correlation with the moon rising. And this particularly fascinated me because the symbol for water, which I've been tying to Imu, correlates with depth and, well, down. It's the abyss, the gorge, a symbol in the West that's representative of the moon, of depth and danger, and I haven't quite placed how this goes, but it almost seems to be implying, at least to me, that both forces actually need to combine, which makes sense when we think about the Bagua at its truest roots, the yin and yang, the great axis. To restore balance in some way, the moon and the sun need to both realign and actually work together. Could this be what Oda was using the Harley text to say? At the end of the third world, we see that they will surely meet again, and I'm thinking that based on the rest of the poem, it actually is talking about the sun and the moon. Maybe Oda is about to go on some crazy berserk and Avatar type stuff with a cool massive eclipse between the sun and the moon, or the sun god and a new moon god. I think both of these options would be absolutely fantastic and epic, and it would explain some of the very particular and peculiar phrasing that is used in this, mural and in the text. If you're a fan of the channel, you might have realized I recently pitched this idea in a video I did about Shaki from a recent chapter, where I think that maybe Laugh Tale could even be the home of the original sun god's body, and that Nika himself, and by association Joy Boy and Luffy, are actually the moon gods. That's why they're named the sun god in the text, because they're not actually the sun god, but the moon god. Maybe Imu isn't actually the biggest force at play here, and the final saga, which will result in the Bagua being balanced, goes a lot deeper than we all previously ever expected. And something I want to even double down on is that while I do think Joy Boy's symbol is the Bagua, there's also a good chance that Oda went balls to the wall and even doubled it up with this entire moon stuff. Because, and this is once again material for a whole different video I want to make, the symbol also perfectly lines up with the 8 phases of the moon, which by the way I have long been thinking might actually be the true nature of the sun god, considering that the Gear 5 form is always shown in front of a moon. The design resembles the Sulong form, which can only be awoken during a full moon. The Harley doesn't even label Nika as the sun god in Japanese. It always says the sun god in quotes, as if that's not its true nature. And I think that the 8 phases of the moon also perfectly work with all the 8 trigrams. So maybe, just maybe, the fire part of all this stuff is the moon god Nika chasing his flame, or channeling the flames of the sun goddess, or someone he loved in the distant past, thus being the truest form of Romance Dawn, the original name for One Piece. By the way, also, the sun and the moon becoming one again, the yin and yang merging into the axis, also becoming One Piece. Not that it doesn't work, right? I wouldn't want to go there all the way, but just wanted to mention it, right? And something else that comes up a lot in Bing Sake are some other key elements used in the Bagua trigrams. I mean, I told you about water and fire, but wind, storms, and the sky are all central themes of Bing Sake. The wind that pushes the ships, storms on the horizon, etc., etc. These also tie very well into various parts of the Bagua too. So I do think that there is more here that even I have not have the time or brains to uncover fully here. But I think that wind might come to be way more important, as you'll see in the next sections when I tie things back into what started this all, the journey to the west. We're back here. All right, but before I do that, I do want to actually tell you why I think that the journey to the west, alongside Bing Sake, do reveal the location of Laugh Tale, and again, how the Bagua led me to that conclusion. This is honestly like the full payoff for all my Bing Sake and Bagua stuff that I've been talking about, and I am very amped up for you to hear what I've pieced together here. Hopefully it makes sense. And once again, I actually do owe another shout out to Arthur, as I said before, because I think he totally nailed it. He's theorized before that the thing that Joy Boy hit on Laugh Tale was the bottle of Bing Sake, a drink that would unite the world together. And I think that this totally tracks with the stuff I was talking about so far, with the moon and the sun coming together. Maybe it's to share some sake, or something like that. I don't know. But I think this idea does line up well with both the name of the song and the story of Kaido and the Bagua. And if your head isn't spinning at this point, you've probably not been listening to the video. Are you cleaning in the background or something? Are you even watching, or are you just listening? It's fine, I'm just kidding with you. There are so many pieces moving here, so please try and stay with me a little bit longer. I'm gonna try to keep it simple. I'm doing a bad job, I know, but stay with me. Let's say that on Laugh Tale is Bing's sake. Something that Luffy needs to find and then share, to complete the Bagua. Which, as I mentioned, is just the act of realigning the energies of the universe and possibly reuniting some powers from the earlier centuries that were lost or captured. Now I say this because, dude, it makes so much sense when you tie back in the Kaido stuff that we were talking about earlier. Kaido's drunken Bagua, Bing's sake, and the dancing and laughing that he and Luffy do during their battle, it could all be some crazy Oda classic foreshadowing for the Laugh Tale price. It's the thing that Kaido wanted to claim, and we know Luffy will claim it, so I think we needed to look more into their shared actions to find the common thread here, which is drinking. It's having fun. To be Joy Boy, you need to be a joyous boy. You need to literally let loose and let the booze rip. Luffy does this without a fail almost every single arc, and so I looked more into the Bagua and found that these symbols do, once again, totally line up. The Journey to the West, if you look at the title literally and apply the Bagua, would be a journey to the lake. The Bagua sign for metal, the West, and joyousness is the West. Kaido wanted to go west. He wanted to do the whole Sun Wukong, Sun God, blah 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 thing that Oda based the entire series on and go west. And what he thought would be there and what I think is there is a lake of sake. Alright, I have lost my marbles completely. I get it. What's this about a lake of sake in El Manu? Well, let me quite literally show you. This is the sake cup, also known as sakazuki, by the way. You've seen it before. It's the dish that is shared between brothers when they do the sake ritual in the series. Shanks and Whitebeard, Luffy and Ace and Sabo, Whitebeard and Roger, you get it. You've seen it. It's a saucer, and if you scaled this thing up, it would literally be a lake. And since the biggest hints about the ancient past, the Joy Boy era, were massive creatures, giant robots, and ancient giants who lived and roamed the earth, we know that's a thing, Zunisha, etc., etc., I think we have literally just been missing the entire scale, and that's why the mural depicts such massive creatures. It's Oda's way of reminding us in a very sneaky way that back then, during the Void Century, things just were way bigger. So if there's a sake cup waiting on Laugh Tale, that thing would be ginormous, probably. Just look at Emeth, look at Zunisha, heck, look at the Gorosei and Imu's transformations, or the biggest loose threat in the series, the giant freaking straw hat in Imu's cellar. Whoever wore that hat was massive, or at least he could become massive, like we've seen Luffy do with his devil fruit becoming the size of an island. So is there an actual sake cup designed to unite the world? The giant Joy Boy sake cup that would have to be a lake of sake? I think the journey to the west that Luffy is on is a journey to the current west, the current Bagua's west, the lake, and under this lens, Laugh Tale would be the end point on Luffy's journey to the Sake Lake that will unite the world once again. And I'll double down even further on this idea. If it's true, I think it would only make sense that Laugh Tale is actually in the West Blue. Luffy started in the East Blue, even though technically on paper he's gonna, been going east through the Grand Line because of how the map works. It's a little bit weird. He's actually going to pop out and end up in the West Blue once he reaches the end of the Grand Line where Laugh Tale is supposed to be located. And he needs to use the 4 poneglyphs to do that because the 4 aspects that Joy Boy created point him towards the center of the Great Axis, and I think it would just be the perfect conclusion point for Luffy too, and we've been getting some crazy hints about how crucial the West Blue has been for literal years now. Oda has been shoving it down our throats. Because the West Blue is like weirdly one of the most important places for pivotal characters and islands in the show. Brook, Robin, Clover, Laboon, Moria, and most importantly, Shanks are all from the West Blue. God Valley, Ohara, Thriller Bark, all prominent islands from the West Blue that seem to have some of the deepest ties to Joy Boy, the Celestial Dragons, the Void Century, and ancient history. I would argue, looking at it now, it feels or seems almost obvious. Of course, that's where Laugh Tale should be. It completes Luffy's journey, a journey to the West Blue. He starts in the East Blue, which would line up with the later Heavens Bagua East, you know, the symbol of excitement, revolution, and divide. These concepts are where Luffy starts out with and what he will bring to the West when he gets there, because he's excited for adventure, he's literally starting national revolutions, and he's fixing the divide. And Luffy is on a journey to the West, which would be the lake in the Bagua, a lake that represents joy, satisfaction, and stagnation. These are the traits associated with the West in the Bagua, and it's clearly where Luffy will end up at the end of the journey. Right now, he is growing, he's learning, and he's changing the world, but he will be the next Joy Boy, someone who will unite the world, become Pirate King, and achieve his dream. So the entire Bagua is straight up embodied by Luffy, a character who is living out his young days from the East to eventually settle and save the world in the West. And this especially works when you look back at what revealed this to me. Once again, Kaido. He is also someone who puts a huge emphasis on the East. His sign that he also embodies is the Thunder sign, the Eastern sign. That's why Kaido is the Thunder Bagua user. He knew that it all started in the East, so he was right. He had the core premise down, but not the journey. He didn't live Luffy's life or solve the same problems that Luffy did. Kaido could not become Joy Boy because he never lived the life necessary to actually become him, and he was using the wrong Bagua to do it as well. But Luffy, pushed by the winds of change, can be. He's done it all. He's freed the slaves like Nika, he sailed the seas like Joy Boy, and after he finds Laugh Tale, he'll do the final thing necessary to fix the world. Luffy will be defeating Emu and or Blackbeard, and in doing so, he'll complete the dream laid out for him, restoring balance to the world, to the forces that Emu or Nika have screwed up so badly. He will, in the modern era, restore the primordial Bagua. And of course, he's gonna do that with his Straw Hat, and if you want to know why I think that the Straw Hat comes from the West Blue and God Valley, and why God Valley might even be the birthplace, or at the very least, the end of the journey for Joy Boy 2, who was buried there, you can watch that video right here, sorry. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. This was a very long video. Thanks to all of my Patreons. You guys are amazing. Check it out if you want to support the channel, please. We're gonna make some of the cool assets here available too on Patreon. Let me know what you think. Is it like, I mean, I'm sure you guys will have a ton of really cool ideas on top of stuff I missed. I will wait and read the comments, and thanks so much for watching.